Well, hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you are connecting from today. I hope you're all doing well. And please let us know where you are connecting from. Just post it in the chat. I'd love to know where everybody is tuning in from. And if you have any questions or comments or reactions, feedback, insights, anything that you want to share with all of us in this community during this chat, please feel free to post it in the comment section. And if you're watching this live, thank you so much for being here. If you're watching the recorded video, thank you so much also for being here. And I hope you also check out all the other amazing conversations we've had in this Hacking HR live chat series. And what we do here is we invite awesome, talented, brilliant authors to share with all of us in the Hacking HR community about the research that they have done, the recommendations, the ideas that they have for all of us, and of course, particularly for HR leaders and HR professionals. So it's been an incredible journey since we started doing this at the beginning of the year. We've had many, many conversations that are truly amazing with so many different insights. So I am hoping that you check that out as well. So anyway, let us know where you are connecting from. Just post it in the chat. And as I mentioned before, if you have any questions or anything that you want to bring up to our attention, mine or anybody else in the audience, please make sure that you post that in the chat. So I'm super excited about the conversation that we are about today, how work works. And I am excited to bring Michelle King to the screen with me today. And good morning, Michelle. Well, I don't know if it's good morning for you. Is it morning for you right now?
Okay, am I live? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're live and we can hear you. Yeah.
Because I'm backstage, it says only you can hear me. So
now I can hear you.
Okay, there we go. I'm here. Hi, everybody. Yes, I'm joining from London in the UK today.
Awesome. Well, good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining us, and very excited to have this conversation with you. And well, let's kick it off here. I would love for you, if you can introduce yourself to our audience, let us know more about who you are, the work you've done, and why did you write a book that is called How Work Works?
Well, I'm a researcher, so I spent 20 years in academia at the same time as working, and I've researched the topic of how work works because for the longest time, in working in the space of inequality in workplaces, I really wanted to understand, if it's true, if that old rule that your advancement has to come at a cost to your coworkers is actually
Mm.
still true. And I think what I found through an extensive amount of research, I mean, the book itself is 15 pages of research notes, is that the world of work has changed, and it's changed quite dramatically in some fundamental ways. And the new world of work really offers an opportunity to manage how you work in a way that benefits both you and your teammates. And so the ability to collaborate, the ability to be inclusive, the ability to connect with people from a wide range of backgrounds, really bridge your differences with others. Those are some of the core skills that people need to navigate the new world of work. And just to give people an example, I mean, 83% of people in workplaces today have to collaborate with others to do their jobs. So back in the 1950s, in the industrial era, you could have gone to work, just completed your tasks, headed home, and that would have been enough, right? What you did was really all that mattered. But today, in the new world of work, how we work really enables what we can achieve, because we have to work with other people to do our jobs. So knowing how to collaborate in an effective way is really, really important. So for me, a lot of authors, a lot of writers will talk about the need for advanced social and emotional skills in the new world of work, but they don't really tell you what that is. And they don't really tell you how to do that as part of your job. How do you develop those skills? 75% of career success comes from social and emotional skills, soft skills. How do you develop those? Because most of the learning, about 70% of all learning, happens informally on the job. And so we have to know how to develop our ability to manage how we work as part of, the everyday. And so this book really shares 4 things that, based on research, that people need to do. And so hopefully, people find it helpful. It's tried to be as practical as possible, but at the same time, really grounded in as much research as possible, because I hate platitudes. I hate it when people just offer their opinions. On what basis are we sharing a lot of this advice? And so this book is grounded in what we know for sure around, how workplaces have changed, how they will change, and what it takes to navigate this new world.
Absolutely. And I'm hoping that we talk a little bit about the 4 components that you share in the book. But I want to begin by asking you this. Could there be a structural problem in workplaces that are designed to do, for the most part, the opposite of what you just said? Meaning they are designed to make people fight with each other for that one promotion that is available, for that one job that is available. When they measure performance, they measure performance of the one person individually and not the performance of the team, even though you're saying 80+% of the work gets done collaboratively. So could there be a structural problem where we, instead of just going with the science and the way people want to work, we're actually doing something that is anti-natural to the way we actually want to do the work in the workplaces?
So it's not really about how we want to work. It's more around how workplaces have changed. So I'll give you a quick example. So if you look at sort of the core changes that have happened and will continue to happen over the next 3 to 5 to 10 years, for me, I really summarize those early on in the book as being AI and automation changing about 50% of the tasks we complete by 2030. That's an incredible statistic, right? And when we look at what are the skills that are required, given AI and automation are going to become a part of how we work, what it boils down to is, yes, you need advanced technical skills, but you also need advanced social and emotional skills, precisely because to innovate, problem solve, and create, you have to work with other people, right? We can't just go to work and do our jobs. The second major change that most workplaces are grappling with is that, by 2044, at least half of the population in the United States is going to be made up of people from typically underrepresented groups, which means, your workplaces are going to look different. We're seeing a 2020 McKinsey report showed workplaces are becoming more demographically diverse, but actually less inclusive. So we're not really knowing how to bridge our differences with others. And that is a core skill because it is guaranteed you are going to work with and for people who do not look like you, do not share your background. So again, having advanced social and emotional skills to bridge those differences, super important. The third major change most of us have experienced and will continue to experience is working in a hybrid context. Well, what do we know about hybrid working? It actually requires advanced social and emotional skills. So even the companies that are pulling back, it's still predicted that 70 to 80% of organizations are going to keep some form of hybrid working. And hybrid working makes it a lot harder to collaborate, right? Because you're on Zoom, I can't see your context, I can't see your nonverbal, cues, I can't tell what's going on for you. It's very difficult for me to collaborate effectively, right? Because it's a lot harder to communicate. And then the fourth and final major change, which gets to your point, is really that if you look at how workplaces have changed, organizations have become a lot flatter, and it's predicted they will continue to. So only 14% of CEOs think that traditional hierarchical command and control transactional structure really works today. And one of the major reasons is decision making. We need flatter organizational structures to allow for more devolved decision making. Well, what does that mean? It means mid-level managers, there's less of a need for them, right? If you look at the US and a lot of tech companies and the recent layoffs, you're seeing a real decline in the need for mid-level managers. It's forecasted, you're much more likely to be working in self-managing teams, right? Where who you work with is way more important than who you work for. And knowing how to collaborate with your teammates is going to be pretty important because they're going to have a say in your performance reviews, maybe even in your pay reviews, right? So collaboration is absolutely king. And I think we have to recognize that's driven out of the necessity to innovate. That's driven out of the necessity to problem solve. That's driven out of the necessity to compete. And in order to do that, we have to be able to make decisions in real time. We can't afford to have that transactional command and control approach to work. So I think what we have to recognize is whether we like it or not, that old world of work has gone, right? That industrial era is gone. We're in the information era. We have to know how to collaborate, how to work with others in order to do our jobs.
Yeah, I love that. And I know that one of the strongest pieces of your book is the conversation about trust, right? And I want to ask you something about that. It may be a perception problem, or it may be completely real and an actual fact that is happening in organizations where you see that the toxic top performer, gets the reward at the end of the day, right? They are the ones growing, they are the ones getting the opportunities, they are the ones getting the visibility, they are the ones getting the rewards. And then you think, wait a second, in my culture, in the culture of this organization, they are telling me that I have to be inclusive, that I have to create the conditions for belonging, that I have to be this and that. But it's that one person that I know delivers results, but has created all these toxicity conditions in the team, the person that is actually growing and the person that is getting all the rewards. So how do you manage that in an environment where you actually want to build trust and you're telling people to behave differently, but you're rewarding those kinds of behaviors?
Yeah, so what we've got to recognize is just because the world of work has changed doesn't mean that we've actually responded to that change, right? A lot of leaders are still leading in a transactional command and control, dominant, aggressive, competitive, and exclusionary way. And you'll see that in teams. So even at an individual contributor level, you might have one person in your team who consistently overestimates their performance, thinks they're amazing, and isn't open to any feedback, the competent jerk you're talking about. And we know that if you just have one of those people on your team, it reduces your team's performance by 50%.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So I say that to share, and that's a Harvard Business Review study. So I say that to share because I think what we have to recognize is, again, to my point, companies can't afford to keep rewarding competent jerks. Because collectively it reduces teams' effectiveness. And today, because we have to work with others to do our jobs, the reality is you can't afford to have that cost on your team's environment. I mean, to give you an example, in inclusive team environments, in environments where employees feel like they can be themselves, share ideas, speak up, make a contribution, your teammates are 6 times more likely to innovate. So we cannot afford to have
Yeah.
cops and jerks. If companies
Yeah.
are still operating in that outdated model where they reward people only on what they achieve rather than on how they achieve, they're really going to struggle to retain key talent, and they're also going to struggle to get the innovation that they're looking for. It just doesn't come from rewarding those outdated behaviors.
Yeah. One thing that I like about your perspective is that it's both geared towards the company, the structure of the organization, meaning the changes that need to happen for those organizations and those leaders to adapt to the changes that are happening in this new world of work. But also they are geared towards the individual, the responsibility of the person to say, is, it's not all on the company to invest in your growth, in your development. You got to put the effort and you got to put the energy into doing this, right? And I want to now ask you questions that are pertain to the actual individual. I always there's a we always share this on the Hacking HR community, telling people that they should be spending a lot of time investing in themselves, because what a company can invest in them is 0.1% of all the amount of investment that needs to happen in that one person for their own growth and employability and whatnot. So can you tell me a little bit more about how can people invest in themselves individually, even if they are an employee of a company? How can they grow? How can they build their networks? How can they find the right kind of mentorship and advice? Anything that you want to share to add some encouragement, inspiration, but also accountability for those individuals to understand that it's not all on the company. In fact, the least amount of something investment is on the company. Most of it is on them.
Mm-hmm. So I think the first thing I'd start off with is recognizing that because the world of work has changed, how we manage our careers has also changed. So typically, in the 1950s workplace, you would be sort of promised a career for life, right? The idea was you'd probably stay with one employer, maybe two at most, and you're trying to progress, right? That was the goal. The promise was you work hard, you do a good job, you will advance. And that's sort of gone. So what we're seeing increasingly is it's not up to companies to manage your career advancement. It's up to you to manage your employability, right? So you have to make sure that you have the right skills, you have the right networks in order to access job opportunities. Because, and I hate to say this while we're on LinkedIn, but if you are relying on LinkedIn for your next job, game over, right? 70% of all jobs come through informal networks. 80% of jobs are not even advertised. So if you're trying to think about, look, it's not just how I manage my current role, it's also about how do I manage my employability, because I've got to think ahead of this job into where I might want to go. You've got to start investing now in your informal network. So one of the 4 areas I really touch on in the book is the importance of investing in an informal network. And most of us, like, the idea of networking feels really gross, right? You're like, oh, I don't want to do that. And the reason we don't want to do it is because it conjures up images of going to sort of formal social events, shaking hands with random people, handing out your business cards. That is not informal networks. So what the research pretty consistently tells us is, if you want to think about who's in your informal network, it tends to be people you go to for advice on how to do your job, people you go to for informal information on what's going on in the company, why decisions are made, to get a sense of what's going on, or people you go to for social support. So if you're having a bad day, you want to talk to somebody, who do you go to? So advice, information, and social support. So if you think of who you go to for those things, that is your informal network. Now, for most people, when they think about networking, they think about, well, who do I need for what, right? But that's not actually how you develop a network. How you develop a network is thinking about who you'd like to connect to, and then thinking about what information, what advice, or what support could I give that person as a means to meaningfully connect. So I'll give you a quick example. I had a meeting with my editors in New York for my book launch. Super excited, very senior editors at HarperCollins. And I thought, you know what? Who could benefit from accessing these editors? Who wants to write a book? And who do I want to connect with in my network? So I reached out to a couple of colleagues, and invited them to the lunch as a means to connect, right? So offering something in advance as a means to build a relationship with people I don't know very well, but I'm trying to establish a connection with. So informal networking is really about thinking in advance of who you want to connect with. Now, how do you know who to connect with? Well, there are three things I want the audience to take away. The first is the diversity of your informal network really matters. So this idea of the 1950s where you just connect with other people who look like you, and you have that old boys network in workplaces, and you exclude people who are different from you, has gone. Like, arguably one of the most predictive factors around promotion and long-term career success is the diversification of your informal network. So put simply, if you think back to your list, the people you go to for information, advice, and support, how different or similar are those people from you? And if you don't know people who are different, you need to really invest in connecting and growing that side of your network. And typically, if you're somebody to always introduce yourself to other people, it's likely that your network's going to be made up of people who are similar to you.
Yeah.
Because we tend to introduce ourselves to people who are similar to us because we like people who are similar to us. So you have to actually think about who's different from me in my network, and can they also introduce me and connect me to people who might be different. You have to be very conscious about it. The second point I want to make is your time is limited. You cannot connect with everybody, right? You cannot. You don't have it in you. So you have to be really mindful about where you're spending your time.
Yeah.
And to do that, I want people to revisit their list of their informal network and look at the names on that list and think about, do the people who are on this list actually have my back? Do they have my best interests at heart? Is it what we call a mutually beneficial relationship? Because if it isn't, that is not a good relationship to invest in. And most people are pretty comfortable with knowing who has my back, who doesn't, who has my best interest at heart, who doesn't. And we tend to only invest in relationships that do. It's not the do they, don't they. It's the middle group where we're unsure. So 90% of your anxiety at work comes from 5% of the people in your informal network.
Wow.
And that's because you're going to have an interaction with them at work, and you're going to spend a huge amount of mental and emotional energy being like, does this person have my back? Are they supporting me? And you're going to stress, right? It's going to cause you anxiety. And then you're going to sort of overly invest in that, and it's not beneficial. So try and cut out ambiguous relationships. So mutually beneficial is the key. And then third and finally, you want to really develop a range of the types of connections. So what we call close connections, where you meet with people frequently, you share lots of information, they're people who you let in and share what's going on with you, versus more infrequent acquaintances where you might say hi if you're passing them in the hall, or on Zoom you might catch up, but you don't share a ton of information. It's not very, very close. And the reason you need a mix is the job opportunities, those 70% of job opportunities that I talked about before that come through an informal network, come through loose connections.
Yeah.
So my job at Netflix, for example, I got that job because I knew somebody, and then they introduced me, and then I went through the recruitment process, right? And that's how informal networks work. And so that's why it's really important to have those three things and actively manage your informal network.
Yeah. I used to, before doing this community work that I do right now, I used to work in, corporate America. And when people would come to me, and I worked in HR, when people would come to me asking me like, hey, how do I get a job in whatever area in this company? I would always tell them, you're going to have 100 coffees with 100 people in here, because for many reasons, right? The number one, like you're saying, is one, you're learning. Maybe you think you want something, and maybe as you have these conversations, you find out that there's something else that is even better than what you actually wanted in the first place. So that's number one. But number two is exactly what you're saying. A lot of these roles are either not posted, or when they're posted, it's just sometimes it's a formality because they have some people in mind already for that, right? But if you have these conversations, you may know in advance that some of these jobs will be posted, or the jobs that are not posted that I don't know about in HR because, for whatever reason. But it is through those conversations that you will find out the kind of skills that they are looking for, the kind of people that they are looking for, the people that you can contribute to and that way you build a relationship with them. So I would always tell people, get ready for 100 coffees, to get to that place. If it's less than 100 coffees, fantastic. But hey, it's is the way that you build, a significant, meaningful network for yourself.
Yeah, and you want to do this, you want to invest before you need it.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think
Oh
the
my gosh,
very
yeah,
way we think about networking
yeah,
front, like it's about almost thinking of it like a bank, right? A
yeah,
savings account where you are building connections, building meaningful relationships, actually having, good connections in place. So when you do need them, you can call on them and reach out, right? And I
yeah.
think that requires like upfront investment from you. So I think once people understand that, they can really start to unlock building their informal network.
Yeah, yeah. And the other piece of it also that I would generally mention to people is that, when you advertise a job, you have a limited amount of space of things that you can say in that, job posting, right? And then you have a conversation with the actual hiring manager or somebody in the team, and you find out that there's a lot that is not being said. Probably most is not being said. And then you know how to refine your interview skills, how to refine, if you're using a resume or a cover letter, which I'm hoping is a different way, but if that's what you're using, then you will be able to refine, the content of all your portfolio of information, so that it really caters to the visible and the invisible things that they are requesting for that job. Because, well, and you only find out about that through those conversations. So I think network, and I love that you said you got to do this uh, before you actually need it. I think it's just very powerful. Michelle, let me ask you this. I know another piece of your book, How Work Works, is about finding meaning in your career, in the work you do. Not necessarily, I don't know if this is the angle that you're taking, not necessarily in the actual job, but in the actual career, in the actual work that you want to do. How do you do that when, I talk a lot about finding meaning at work, right? And most people, and this is, just observations or stories that they tell me. A lot of people are like, yeah, man, but I can't really find meaning in my work. It's like I'm busy with the daily grind all the time, that I'm not even allowed to even think about finding meaning at work. So how do you think about finding purpose, finding meaning in the work that you do, whether you do it yourself intentionally and individually, or whether because your job is actually providing those opportunities?
So, what I would say is typically when you think about meaning at work, people will think about it in terms of a job title or a paycheck, right?
Hmm.
And we think, look, it's my work's going to be meaningful if I'm successful.
Yeah,
But unfortunately, that's not really supported in the research.
yeah,
So, career success, actually, the root word for success, the Latin word, is exitus. It means to exit. And if you think about career success, we often think of it in terms of arriving at a position or arriving at a paycheck, right? The reality is it's not. It's about what you leave behind, it's about the contribution you make.
yeah.
And generally, what most of us are looking for in workplaces are five things. We never think of it like this, but there's five things. There's five things that boil down to the core needs most of us have. The first is most of us want to feel physically and psychologically safe at work,
Yeah.
right? That's a core requirement, core need. If you don't feel safe, if you don't feel sort of mentally safe or physically safe, you're going to struggle, right, in your workplace. The second thing most of us need, and this is a need, not a want, this is a fundamental need, is connection. So we want to feel like we belong. We want to feel like we can be ourselves, be valued for that. The third piece most people have is they want a sense of being able to have autonomy or the freedom to contribute. So they want to be able to manage their job. They don't want to be sort of overlooked. They want that freedom to take control of their task, do their job, and do it in a way that makes a contribution and know that that contribution is going to be valued, right? So that whole piece around making a contribution is really important. The fourth piece is most people want opportunities to learn and grow. So wanting to be able to learn new things, learn new skills, grow and develop. And finally, most people need to know that the contribution they make is going to be recognized and rewarded by the organization. Five things. The challenge is for a lot of us, the old world of work, where it was very transactional. You go in, do your task, collect your paycheck, and leave. For a lot of people, is still the reality of their workplaces. Workplaces haven't been able to meet any of those needs. And I know a lot of people watching this will be suddenly evaluating their job in terms of, well, does it meet one or all of those 5 needs, right? And for me, when it comes to meaning, it's not just about how you meet those needs. It's also about, how, if those needs aren't being met, what can you do? So I think we've seen the rise of quiet quitting. We've seen the lazy girl jobs phenomenon. Now I think it's snail girl jobs. I mean, these are awful terms, but all of them describe people's dissatisfaction with their workplaces. People are sick and tired of going to work and not having core needs met. And anyone who's thinking, well, a paycheck should be enough. Not true. Next to sleep, work is where you spend the most number of hours over your lifetime. Work literally makes up a significant portion of your life. So if it's not meaningful, there's a good section of your life that isn't meaningful. So meaning matters, right? It equates to everything: productivity, engagement, performance, the likelihood you're going to advance and stay with your organization. Meaning is everything. And the one thing we know about meaning is, even if some of your needs aren't met, there are things you can do to derive greater meaning and fulfillment at work. And one of them is paying it forward. So this idea that you can, through conscious effort, think about different ways to support your co-workers, right? And in academia, we call it organizational citizenship behaviors. But what my research found is it's not just thinking of small acts of kindness or things you can do. It's not that. It's actually being very intentional about, who do you network with? Who do you share informal information with? Who do you support in terms of their development? Who are you giving feedback to? Who are you giving advice to? Who are you giving information to help that person's development? Who are you advocating for when it comes to their career advancement? How are you investing in the people you work with? We are our workplaces. If you are struggling at work, it's because you are not connected to the people that you work with. So building connections requires some form of paying it forward. 9 out of 10 people want greater meaning and fulfillment at work, and they're willing to give up a significant portion of lifetime earnings, as much as you spend on housing, to find that meaning and fulfillment. So what I would recommend is start to think about, how are you paying that forward? What are you doing to invest in your teammates and the people that you work with, even if you struggle with your boss, right? Think it through. And outside of that, what I want to say to anybody who's skeptical about this is, what research finds is, if I pay it forward to you, let's say I introduce you to someone in my network as a means to stay connected to you beyond this interview, right? Or I send you an interesting article on the topic we've talked about as a way to sort of get to know you better and share information. What research finds is, I will feel better for having done that. So I will come away feeling more connected, more engaged, a greater sense of belonging, just for having paid it forward and tried to connect with you. Now, you are also going to be like, wow, Michelle did that. That's great. I'm going to pay it forward back to Michelle, because we live in a world of reciprocity where that's the norm. So you're going to benefit me by paying it back to me. But the incredible thing is, anyone observing us doing this, and particularly me paying it forward to you, is going to want to pay it forward to me as well.
Yeah.
That's where you get the triple compounded effect. That's why this is such an effective practice. So we have to recognize that the meaning, the fulfillment, the job satisfaction, everything we want is on the other side of recognizing we are part of a community at work. And if you're struggling in your workplace, you've got to think about, what are you doing to be connected to your work environment? And, I think that's really important, because I think a lot of us are struggling with this at the moment.
Yeah. Well, well, first of all, I am more than 100% aligned with everything that you said. But in particular, I want to highlight something you said that I absolutely loved and love, because we share a lot about that same mindset in Hacking HR, which is, you are the workplace. You build kindness when you're kind. You build a workplace of better connections and more meaning when you build those meaningful connections with others. You create a space for people to feel that they belong when you make them feel that they belong. And it's, I have found in my career that it's very easy to blame somebody else, right? It's very easy to blame. I mean, you can have a toxic leader. I mean, we can't deny that there are very toxic leaders. We can deny that there are very toxic workplaces that it's more, very often it's not worth doing anything about them other than leaving because they won't change. But in most cases, that's not what really happens. It's whether you can actually do something to be the kind of workplace that you want to, be part of, right? I mean, the kind of like Gandhi, quote thing, right? Be the change that you want to see in the world. Well, build the workplace, be the workplace that you want to be part of, right? And I absolutely love that because it really puts responsibility on all of us, not just the leaders, not just, a blurry, image of what a workplace is. It puts responsibility on all of us to build that kind of workplace. And I absolutely love that.
Yes, and to make it really simple for everybody, just think back to informal networks, right?
Yeah.
Who are you sharing information with? Who are you giving advice to? And who you're providing support to? If you just do those three things and are conscious about how you're playing that forward, you'll feel more connected to your workplace. You really will.
Love it. Michelle, as we get closer to wrapping up our conversation, and I've taken more time than I asked you for, so forgive me about that. But I wanted to ask you one last question to wrap it up. Most of our community members are people in HR leaders, HR professionals. If there's one thing that you would want them to do, not individually, but at an organizational wide level, something that they could do to create the conditions for people to be the workplace they want to see, for people to pay it forward, for people to build those informal networks, for people to have that kind of support and encouragement to do all of this, one thing that they can do from their HR function, what would that be?
Focus on self-awareness. So there's a whole chapter on this. So I'd mentioned informal information sharing. What that is if you think about the information people share informally, what does that actually get you? Well, if people are sharing what's going on in the organization, what's happening, what they've heard about you, all of that actually serves to build your self-awareness. So what is self-awareness? It's the gap between how we see ourselves and our behavior and the impact it has and how other people view that impact, right? And self-aware people take active steps to close the gap. They know how they see themselves, but they also know how others see them, and they actively manage that gap. They close the gap. So they integrate other people's feedback into how they're showing up. The problem is about 95% of people think they're self-aware, but only about 15% of people are, 1-5. So most of us are walking around kind of overly estimating the positive impact our behavior is having. Now, what do we know about overestimators? If you are that person who is on your team, who thinks you're amazing and doesn't want to hear the feedback and you're the competent jerk, you're going to reduce your team's performance by 50%. Yeah. So if you're an HR professional, I would say what we overlook, and it is super important when it comes to diversity and inclusion and culture generally, is start to build employees' self-awareness. So how do we do that? There's really two ways. One is you've got to look at self-reflection as a regular practice. So one study found if you take 15 minutes a day, 1-5, and you can do this when you walk your dog, you can do this when you're in the shower, and you ask yourself what questions, like what worked, what didn't, what could I do differently? You do that once a day for 10 days, you will increase your self-awareness by 23%. And you might be sitting there going, well, Michelle, that's 23%. But think about the compounded effect of doing that over 30 days, right?
Yeah.
You're really going to start to close that gap. That's one way. The second thing I want HR professionals to think about is how are you making informal feedback a regular practice? So don't wait for your annual performance, like ignore the formal system, right? I'm talking about when an employee finishes a presentation, is it a regular practice in your company for them to turn to their coworker or their teammate and just say, hey, what worked? What didn't? What do you think I could do differently?
Well,
and if they're regularly collecting that feedback, they're going to know where the gap is. They can adjust their behavior. So those are the two things I would say, really try and make them practices to look at. And there's a model in the book for how to give and receive feedback that can help HR professionals with that.
Yeah, well, this is fantastic. Once again, it is becoming the workplace that you want to be part of, right? It is building that culture in the everyday, organic, ordinary interactions between everybody in the organization. So, Michelle, thank you so much for spending this time with me, for sharing all of your insights of how work works, and encouraging and inspiring our community to create better organizations for everybody. So, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I'll see you soon in our next live chat series or the next events that we have available for you. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a good day. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.